I never imagined that 30 years of building commercial properties across Ontario would lead me here, standing in the darkened hallway of my own Whistler cabin at 11:30 p.m. on a Thursday night, watching through the crack of my study door as my son and my business partner of 25 years discussed the best way to stage my skiing accident. Margaret, my wife of 42 years, lay motionless in our master bedroom down the hall, her breathing shallow and irregular. I'd driven 8 hours from Toronto instead of flying to Montreal like I'd told everyone, arriving 4 days ahead of schedule because something in Ryan's voice during our last phone call had felt wrong. Now I understood why. The property trust fund we'd built together, worth $8.3 million, was about to be transferred into accounts I'd never opened, signed with a signature I'd never written. Margaret and I had spent 4 decades building our life together. We'd started with a small duplex renovation in Scarborough back in 1983, worked our way through the housing boom of the 90s, and eventually partnered with Daniel McLeod to develop commercial properties across the GTA. By the time I turned 60, we owned a portfolio that generated enough passive income for us to split our time between our Toronto home and this cabin in Whistler. Our son Ryan had joined the family business 5 years ago, and when he married Daniel's daughter Jessica 3 years back, it felt like we were building something that would last generations. Our daughter Sarah had chosen academia instead, teaching environmental science at UBC, but she visited often, and we'd always been close. 3 weeks ago, Margaret had called me in Toronto. I was there closing a deal on a Mississauga plaza while she stayed at the cabin. Her words were slurred, confused. She said she felt dizzy all the time. Couldn't remember conversations we'd apparently had. I'd suggested she see Dr. Peterson in Whistler. Maybe it was altitude sickness or early onset dementia like her mother had. Ryan, who was staying at the cabin to help Mom while Dad's away, had been quick to agree. Too quick. Then yesterday, when I called to say I'd be visiting Margaret's mother in Montreal for a few days before returning to Whistler, Ryan's response had been odd. Relief in his voice. A barely concealed "that's perfect, Dad," before he caught himself. So, instead of flying east, I'd driven west. 8 hours through the night, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, as I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. But when I pulled up to our cabin at 11 p.m. and saw Daniel McLeod's Lexus in the driveway alongside Ryan's truck, when I saw lights on in my study where I kept all the property documents and trust paperwork, when I circled around back and peered through the study window to see my son and my business partner hunched over my desk with stacks of papers spread between them, I knew my instincts had been right. I'd entered through the back door as quietly as possible. The cabin was silent except for low voices from my study. I'd moved down the hallway, past Sarah's empty bedroom, and pushed open the door to the master suite. Margaret lay in our bed, her face slack, breathing in a way that reminded me of surgical recovery. On the nightstand sat 3 prescription bottles I'd never seen before. Lorazepam, Trazodone, Zolpidem, all prescribed by a doctor. Chen in Vancouver I'd never heard of, all filled 2 months ago. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and photographed the labels. Then I'd heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly stepped out, pulling the bedroom door nearly closed behind me. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, had walked past carrying a glass of water without even noticing me in the shadows. She'd entered the bedroom, and I'd watched through the crack as she lifted Margaret's head and helped her swallow something from one of those bottles. "Just your sleeping pill, Mom," Jessica had whispered. "You need your rest." That's when I'd moved to the hallway outside my study, where I now stood with my phone recording, listening to my son and my business partner plan my murder. "The trust documents need to be filed by Monday," Daniel was saying. His Scottish accent, usually charming at company dinners, now sounded cold and calculated. "Once Thomas's signature is on the transfer forms, we move the properties into the holding company, the numbered company we set up in Vancouver." "What if my father actually checks the documents?" Ryan asked. "My son, my boy who I'd taught to ride a bike, who I'd taken to Maple Leafs games, who I'd trusted with our family legacy. He reviews everything." "He won't get the chance," Daniel replied. "The skiing accident happened Saturday morning. You, me, and Thomas go up Blackcomb like we've done dozens of times. Except this time, Thomas doesn't make it down. Tragic accident. By the time anyone thinks to review the trust paperwork, it'll be done. Jessica's already got your mother so medicated she can barely remember her own name. The doctors will assume grief, maybe dementia. No one questions a widow's confusion. And Sarah, your sister's in Vancouver until next week. By the time she flies up here, your father will be gone, and your mother will be too unstable to tell her anything coherent. I felt my stomach drop. The casual way they discussed it, the planning, the attention to detail. This wasn't a sudden crime of opportunity. This had been months in the making. What about Patrick? Ryan asked. The handyman's been coming by a lot. Says Mom asked him to check on things. Patrick's nobody, Daniel said dismissively. Irish immigrant, cash jobs, probably here illegally. Who's going to believe him over us? They were wrong about Patrick. Patrick O'Brien had been doing maintenance work on our properties for 3 years. Former electrician from Cork, here on a work visa, honest as they come. Margaret had taken a liking to him, always making sure he had lunch when he worked on the cabin. If he'd been checking on her, it meant he'd noticed something was wrong. I pulled back from the door as I heard chairs scraping. They were moving. I ducked into Sarah's bedroom and pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering as I heard them walk past. I'll forge the signatures tonight, Daniel said. We'll practice the route tomorrow morning. Make sure we know exactly where it needs to happen. Saturday morning, 7 a.m. We make the call to Whistler Blackcomb that Thomas had an accident on an expert run. Won't they investigate? Thomas is 63 years old, with a previously documented heart condition. I've made sure his medical records show some chest pain last year. Skiing accident. At his age? Tragic, but not suspicious. Their voices faded as they headed toward the front of the cabin. I heard the front door open and close. Through Sarah's window, I watched Daniel get into his Lexus and drive away. Ryan stood in the driveway for a moment, staring up at the dark windows of the master bedroom, where his mother lay drugged, then went back inside. I waited 5 minutes, then carefully made my way back down the hallway. Ryan had gone to the kitchen. I could hear him opening the refrigerator, the clink of bottles. I moved to my study door and pushed it open. The desk was covered in documents, property titles, trust agreements, transfer forms. And there, in the center, a stack of papers with my signature already forged at the bottom. I photographed everything, my hands steadier now, the shock giving way to cold clarity. I opened the desk drawers, found more documents, bank statements for accounts I'd never opened, correspondence between Ryan and Daniel going back 8 months. They'd been planning this since last spring. In the bottom drawer, hidden under files, I found something worse. A life insurance policy on me that I'd never signed. $20 million. With Margaret as the primary beneficiary, but Ryan and Jessica as secondary beneficiaries. The signature looked perfect. The date was from 6 months ago, during a trip to Vancouver I'd taken for a property viewing. I remembered that trip. Ryan had insisted on coming along. He'd said he wanted to learn more about commercial assessments. I'd been proud of his initiative. The pieces fell into place. The Vancouver trip where they must have forged my signature with a notary they'd paid off. The gradual drugging of Margaret that started shortly after. The way Ryan had volunteered to stay at the cabin to help Mom while I was in Toronto. Daniel's increasingly frequent visits to Whistler, always with some excuse about checking on property values in the area. Jessica moving her schedule around to be here more often. Always so helpful, so caring with her mother-in-law. I heard footsteps. Ryan was coming back down the hallway. I quickly pocketed several of the forged documents and slipped out of the study, moving silently back toward the rear entrance. I made it outside just as I heard Ryan enter the study. My breath came in cold puffs in the November mountain air. I stood behind the cabin, trying to process what I'd just discovered, when I heard a voice behind me. "Mr. Whitmore?" I spun around. Patrick stood there, wearing his work jacket, a look of relief crossing his weathered Irish face. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. I thought something terrible had happened to you," he said quietly. "Your wife. She asked me to check on her when you were away. Said she felt like something wasn't right. But then, your son, he told me not to come back. said my services weren't needed anymore. Patrick, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. How long have you been here? I've been sleeping in my truck down the road for 3 nights, he admitted. Didn't feel right, leaving Mrs. Whitmore alone. Tonight I saw the lights on late, saw Mr. McLeod arrive. Something felt wrong, so I came up through the woods to check. Did you hear anything? Bits and pieces through the window. Enough to know you're in danger, sir. I looked at this man, this immigrant handyman they dismissed as nobody, and made a decision. Patrick, I need your help. But first, I need to get evidence. Real evidence. Can you get into the cabin without being seen? I've got keys to the back door, he said. Mrs. Whitmore gave them to me months ago for the repair work. Good. Ryan's in the study. I need to check on my wife, get photos of those medication bottles, and then I need to get to those documents before he locks them away. And then we call the RCMP. But I need enough evidence that they can't talk their way out of this. Patrick nodded. I'll create a distraction. Give you time. He moved around to the front of the cabin. A moment later, I heard knocking on the front door, then Patrick's voice, loud and slightly slurred. Ryan! Ryan, my boy! I left my toolbox here earlier. Need to grab it before I head home. I heard Ryan's annoyed voice, footsteps moving toward the front door. I slipped back inside through the rear entrance and moved quickly to the master bedroom. Margaret was exactly as I'd left her, barely conscious. I took more photos of the medications, then carefully lifted her eyelids. Her pupils were pinpricks, heavily sedated. Margaret, I whispered, can you hear me? A slight movement. Her hand twitched. I'm going to fix this, I told her. I promise you, I'm going to fix this. I heard voices at the front door still. Patrick was doing his job, rambling on about his tools, apologizing for the late hour. I moved back to the study and took more photos, making sure I captured every document, every signature, every piece of evidence. Then I noticed something else. A laptop, open on the desk, password still logged in. Ryan's laptop. I pulled up the email application. Months of correspondence between Ryan, Daniel, and Jessica. Discussions about the timing, about the medications they'd researched, about the skiing accident plan, about what to do with Margaret afterward. The phrase long-term care facility appeared multiple times. They were going to have her committed once I was gone. I forwarded every email to my own address, then to Sarah's. Then I sent them to our family lawyer, David Chen, with a message. Read these immediately. I'm in danger. Thomas. I heard the front door close. Patrick's distraction was over. I quickly closed the laptop, made sure everything looked untouched, and moved toward the hallway. But I was a heartbeat too slow. The study door opened and Ryan stood there, staring at me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I watched my son's face cycle through shock, fear, and then something harder, calculation. Dad, he said slowly, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Montreal. Change of plans, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. Wanted to surprise your mother. At midnight, I drove instead of flying. Traffic was lighter than I expected. Ryan's eyes flicked to the desk behind him, to the laptop, to the documents, trying to remember if he'd left anything visible. Does Mom know you're here? He asked. She's sleeping. I didn't want to wake her. I moved toward the hallway. I'm pretty tired myself. Long drive. Think I'll head to bed. Ryan moved to block my path. Not overtly, but enough. Actually, Dad, since you're here, maybe we should talk. About the business. There are some papers that need your signature. It's midnight, Ryan. Can't it wait until morning? It really can't. His voice had changed. Harder now. Daniel needs them filed by Monday. You know how he is about deadlines. I'll look at them tomorrow. Dad. His hand moved to the door frame, casually but firmly blocking my exit. The papers are important. Transfer documents for the trust. We need to consolidate some holdings for tax purposes. Daniel explained it all. You really should sign them tonight. I felt the weight of my phone in my pocket, the evidence I'd just gathered. I thought about Margaret, helpless in our bedroom, about Sarah, who had no idea what her brother had become, about Patrick outside, probably still nearby. Ryan, I said carefully, What did you give your mother? His jaw tightened. What are you talking about? The medications. Lorazepam, trazodone, zolpidem. Where did they come from? Dr. Chen prescribed them. Mom's been having trouble sleeping, some anxiety issues. You've been gone so much lately, Dad. You haven't noticed how she's been struggling. I called Dr. Peterson's office from the road. They've never heard of a Dr. Chen. The mask slipped. Just for a second, but I saw it. The real Ryan underneath. Cold, desperate, trapped. Dad, you're tired. You're not thinking clearly. Let's talk about this in the morning. I saw the documents, Ryan. I saw the forged signatures. I heard you and Daniel. His face went white. You heard, he caught himself. You don't understand. You don't know what you're talking about. I know that you and Daniel have been planning to kill me. I know you've been drugging your mother. I know about the life insurance policy, the staged accident, all of it. Dad, I have evidence, photos, recordings, emails. I've already sent them to our lawyer. Ryan's expression crumbled. For a moment, I saw the boy he'd been, the son I'd raised. Then it hardened into something else. You don't understand the pressure, he said, his voice tight. The business, the debts, Jessica's expectations. Daniel said we could fix everything. He said it would be clean. No one would suspect. So you decided to murder your father? You were going to retire anyway. Leave everything to Sarah and me. This way, we'd get it sooner, and Mom would be taken care of. Your mother is being poisoned by you and your wife. She's comfortable. She doesn't even know what's happening. The medications just keep her calm, keep her from asking questions. Questions about what you were doing to her husband? Ryan's hands clenched into fists. Where's your phone, Dad? What? Your phone. The one with the photos and recordings. Give it to me. Ryan, think about what you're doing. I've thought about nothing else for months. Do you know what it's like? Living in your shadow. Everyone always comparing us. Your father did this. Your father built that. Never good enough. Never successful enough. Well, this way, I get to be the one in charge. I get to be the successful developer. Not your son. Not Thomas Whitmore's boy. Just Ryan Whitmore, the man who took over after his father's tragic accident. He moved toward me, and I realized with a jolt of fear that he meant to physically take my phone. My son, who I'd taught to throw a football, was advancing on me with violence in his eyes. Ryan, stop. Give me the phone, Dad. No. He lunged. I sidestepped, years of recreational hockey giving me reflexes he'd forgotten I had. My shoulder caught his chest, sending him stumbling back into the study doorframe. Patrick, I shouted. Patrick, call the police. Ryan recovered and came at me again, grabbing for my jacket pocket where my phone was. We grappled in the narrow hallway, and I realized how much stronger he was than me, how much younger. His hand closed on my phone and wrenched it free. Got it, he panted. Then the front door burst open and Patrick was there, moving faster than I'd expected for a man in his 50s. He grabbed Ryan from behind, pulling him away from me in a practiced motion that spoke of old skills. Let go of me. Ryan struggled, but Patrick had him in a solid hold. The police are already on their way, lad, Patrick said calmly. Called them the moment I heard shouting. Now settle down before you make this worse. You don't understand what you're doing, Ryan said desperately. This is family business. This is none of your concern. Your father's life is my concern. Your mother's well-being is my concern. And what you were planning. Patrick's voice hardened. I've seen enough evil in my life, boy. I'll not stand by while more happens. I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder. Ryan heard them too. Something broke in him. His body sagged in Patrick's grip. I'm sorry, he whispered. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't, Jessica said it would be easy. Daniel said no one would know. I never meant for it to get this far. But it did get this far, I said quietly. You drugged your mother. You planned to kill me. You were going to steal everything we built. I wanted to be enough, to be successful, to prove I could do it. You were enough, I said, and I felt tears burning in my eyes. You were always enough, Ryan. You didn't need to do this. The sirens were right outside now. Red and blue lights washed through the windows. I heard car doors slamming, footsteps on the porch, authoritative voices calling out, "RCMP, is everyone all right?" "In here," I called out. "We're in here." 2 officers entered, hands on their weapons, taking in the scene. Patrick carefully released Ryan, who slumped against the wall. 1 officer moved to secure Ryan, while the other approached me. "Sir, are you Thomas Whitmore?" "I am." "We got a call from a David Chen, your lawyer. He said you were in immediate danger and forwarded us some disturbing emails. Can you tell me what's going on?" I told them. All of it. As I spoke, more officers arrived. They found Margaret in the bedroom, barely conscious. They called an ambulance. They secured the study and began photographing the documents. They read Ryan his rights as he stood there, tears streaming down his face. No longer my son, but a stranger who'd tried to kill me for money. Jessica appeared from somewhere in the cabin, still in her nightclothes, looking confused and frightened until she understood what was happening. Then she tried to run. They caught her at the back door. At 3 a.m., I sat in the back of an ambulance as a paramedic checked my vitals. Margaret had been taken to Whistler Medical Center, where doctors were working to flush the medications from her system. Ryan and Jessica were in separate police cars, heading to the local RCMP detachment. Officers were still inside the cabin, gathering evidence. "Mr. Whitmore?" One of the detectives approached me. "We've secured the scene. We'll need you to come to the detachment to give a full statement, but given the hour and what you've been through, tomorrow morning is fine. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" "I'll take him to my place," Patrick said, appearing at my elbow. "I've got a spare room above my garage. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and secure." I looked at this man, this nobody who Ryan and Daniel had dismissed, who'd been the only one to notice something wrong, who'd stayed to protect my wife even when told to leave, who'd called the police and possibly saved my life. "Patrick," I said, "I don't know how to thank you." "No thanks needed, sir. Your wife was kind to me when others weren't. Least I could do was return the favor." The detective nodded. "We'll post an officer at the hospital with Mrs. Whitmore, and we'll need to bring in Daniel McLeod for questioning. Do you know where he's staying?" "He owns a condo in Whistler Village, Blackcomb Lodge, Unit 407. We'll pick him up within the hour." The detective paused. "Mr. Whitmore, what you did tonight, gathering that evidence, staying calm, getting help that took courage. A lot of men would have confronted them directly and ended up dead. You outthought them. I didn't feel courageous. I felt hollowed out, exhausted, and heartbroken that my own son had been willing to kill me." Patrick drove me to his modest apartment above a garage on the edge of town. The spare room was exactly as he'd described, nothing fancy, but clean and warm. I sat on the bed, my phone recovered from Ryan by the police and returned to me in my hands. I had 17 missed calls from Sarah. My daughter. I'd forgotten, in the chaos, that she'd received those emails too. I called her back. She answered on the first ring. "Dad? Dad, oh my God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Those emails, what's happening? Where's Ryan? Where's Mom? Are you okay?" "Sarah, sweetheart, I need you to sit down." I told her everything. I heard her crying on the other end of the line. Heard her shock and disbelief turn to rage and then grief. Her brother, her own brother, had done this. "I'm getting the first flight out," she said. "I'll be there by morning." "Dad, I'm so sorry." I knew something was wrong. Ryan had been acting strange, asking weird questions about the trust, about your health. But I never imagined he'd... "I know, honey. I know. Is Mom going to be okay?" "The doctors think so. They're flushing the medications from her system. She'll need time to recover, but she's going to be okay." "And you? Are you okay?" Was I okay? My son had tried to kill me. My business partner of 25 years had betrayed me. My daughter-in-law had been poisoning my wife. Everything I'd built, everything I'd believed about my family, had been revealed as a lie. "I will be," I told her. "We'll get through this." After we hung up, I sat in that small room and let myself feel it. All of it. The betrayal, the grief, the anger, the fear, the relief at being alive. Patrick knocked softly and came in with a cup of tea. Sat with me in companionable silence until the first light of dawn began to break over the mountains. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. The hospital. Margaret was awake, confused, frightened, but awake and asking for me. Patrick drove me there. I sat by Margaret's bedside and held her hand as the doctor explained what had been done to her. Watched her face as she processed that her son, our son, had been drugging her for months. Held her as she wept. "I thought I was losing my mind," she whispered. "I couldn't remember things, couldn't think clearly. I kept asking Ryan if something was wrong with me, and he'd just give me another pill, tell me I needed to rest. I'm so sorry," I told her. "I'm sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." "You saved us," she said, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "You figured it out and you saved us." Sarah arrived at noon, rushing into the hospital room and embracing both of us, all three of us crying together. The family we had left. The family that was real. The RCMP arrested Daniel McLeod at his condo. They found more evidence there, the forged notary stamps they'd used, records of payments to a corrupt lawyer in Vancouver, detailed plans for the skiing accident. Daniel tried to claim ignorance, tried to blame everything on Ryan, but the emails told a different story. This had been his idea from the start. My young, impressionable son had been recruited into it, manipulated by his father-in-law and his own wife. The investigation took weeks. Ryan and Jessica were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and administration of a noxious substance. Daniel faced those same charges, plus forgery and corruption of a public official. The trial wouldn't happen for months, but the evidence was overwhelming. Patrick refused any reward at first. "I did what any decent person would do," he insisted, but Margaret and I wouldn't hear of it. We found out he'd been saving for years to bring his daughter over from Ireland, working cash jobs to afford the immigration fees. We covered those fees, helped him get proper work documentation, and hired him as the property manager for our entire portfolio. When his daughter Maeve arrived 3 months later, studying nursing at UBC, she told us her father had called us angels. We told her that her father was the real angel. The trial happened 8 months later. I testified against my son. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Ryan took the stand and admitted everything, said he'd been weak, said Daniel had manipulated him, said he was sorry. The jury didn't care. Conspiracy to commit murder. 22 years in a federal prison. Jessica got 18 years. Daniel McLeod got 25. Sarah never spoke to her brother again. Neither did Margaret. I wrote him one letter, 6 months into his sentence. Told him that I forgave him, but that he'd made his choices and would have to live with the consequences. Told him that when he got out, if he wanted to rebuild his life honestly, I'd help him, but that he'd destroyed the family we had, and that could never be repaired. He wrote back once. Just 3 words. "I know, Dad." Margaret recovered slowly. The medications had done damage, affecting her memory and cognition. She worked with therapists, relearned things she'd forgotten, fought her way back to herself. A year later, she was mostly back to normal, though she still had nightmares about those lost months, about being trapped in her own body while her son poisoned her. We sold the Whistler cabin. Too many dark memories. We kept the Toronto house and spent more time there, closer to Sarah, who'd taken a position at the University of Toronto to be near us. Patrick and Maeve became like family. Sunday dinners at our place, holidays together, the family we'd chosen rather than the one we'd lost. I stayed active in the business, but let Patrick handle most of the day-to-day operations. He had a gift for it, and more importantly, I trusted him completely. Trust. Such a simple word, such a complex reality. I'd trusted my son and my business partner, and they'd betrayed me. I'd trusted a handyman I barely knew, and he'd saved my life. 2 years after that terrible night, I stood in the backyard of our Toronto home, watching Margaret laugh at something Maeve said, watching Patrick proudly show off photos of his grandson who'd just been born in Cork. Sarah appeared beside me, slipping her arm through mine. "You okay, Dad?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. "Yeah, I'm okay." "Do you ever think about him? About Ryan?" "Every day," I admitted. "I think about the son he was, the boy I raised. I mourn that person. But the man he became, The choices he made, those were his own. Mom asked me if I wanted to visit him in prison. What did you say? I said no. Maybe someday. But not yet. The wounds are still too fresh. I nodded. I understood that. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical injury. The knowledge that your own child looked at you and saw only an obstacle to wealth, only a problem to be eliminated. That was a wound that might never fully heal. But standing there in the warm September sunshine, surrounded by people who'd proven their loyalty and love, I realized something important. We'd survived. Margaret and I. We'd survived something designed to destroy us. And we'd built something new from the ruins. Not the family we'd planned on. Not the legacy I'd imagined passing to my son. But something real. Something honest. Something worth protecting. Patrick caught my eye from across the yard and raised his glass of iced tea in a silent toast. I raised mine back. To survivors. To trust earned. To the family we choose. To second chances and new beginnings. Margaret moved to my other side, taking my free hand, and we stood there together. Sarah, Margaret, and me watching our chosen family celebrate life on an ordinary Sunday afternoon. The property empire I'd built with Daniel still existed, managed now by honest people who earned their positions. The trust fund Ryan had tried to steal was secure and would one day go to Sarah and, we hoped, to her future children. The nightmares still came sometimes. I'd wake at 2 a.m. and remember standing in that dark hallway, listening to my son plan my murder. But Margaret would be there beside me, awake and alive, and that was enough. We'd been given a second chance. Not many people who are targeted for murder by their own family can say that. 3 years after the arrests, a letter came from the prison, not from Ryan, from his therapist. She said Ryan had been working hard in therapy, that he'd shown genuine remorse, that he wanted to know if we'd ever consider allowing him to write to us. No expectations, no demands, just a question. Margaret and I discussed it for weeks. Sarah said she'd support whatever decision we made. In the end, we agreed to limited contact. Supervised letters only. No visits, not yet. Maybe not ever. But a door left slightly open, just a crack, for the possibility of some kind of reconciliation. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but acknowledgement that he existed, that he was still somewhere deep down our son. His first letter arrived a month later. It was 4 pages of apology, of taking responsibility, of explaining how he'd fallen into Daniel's influence, how greed and inadequacy had poisoned his thinking. It was heartbreaking to read, but it was also honest in a way Ryan hadn't been honest in years. We didn't write back immediately. Sat with it. Thought about it. Eventually, Margaret wrote a brief response. Acknowledged his letter. Didn't absolve him, but didn't condemn him either. Just said we'd received his words, and we're trying to heal. That's where we are now. Trying to heal. Building new lives from the rubble of the old. Margaret volunteers at a women's shelter, helping abuse victims recognize the signs of being controlled or manipulated. Sarah continues her environmental work, fighting for causes bigger than family drama. Patrick manages our properties with integrity and care, providing good housing for tenants who appreciate his fairness. And me? I write. Started a blog for fathers and families, sharing our story with permission and carefully edited to protect privacy, to help others recognize signs of financial elder abuse, family manipulation, inheritance theft. I get emails every week from people who saw our story and recognize similar patterns in their own families. Sometimes we can help them avoid what happened to us. Sometimes we can only offer support after the fact. The business runs itself now. The properties generate income we use for causes that matter: elder protection, advocacy, immigrant support services in Patrick's honor, environmental initiatives that Sarah champions. Money that was almost stolen to fund murder now goes toward preventing such crimes and helping victims. I think sometimes about that night, about the decision to drive west instead of flying east, about checking on Margaret instead of going straight to confront Ryan, about trusting Patrick when every other instinct said to trust no one. Small choices, small moments. They saved our lives. Sarah asked me once if I'd do anything differently. I thought about it for a long time. I'd have noticed sooner, I finally said. I'd have paid more attention to Ryan's growing resentment, to Daniel's increasing interest in our trust structure, to Margaret's complaints about feeling foggy. I'd have trusted my instincts earlier. But you did trust your instincts, she pointed out. That phone call with Ryan felt wrong, and you acted on it. She was right. In the end, instinct saved us. The feeling that something was off. The willingness to trust a stranger over family when that stranger proved more trustworthy. The courage to gather evidence instead of confronting them immediately. The wisdom to call for help. 4 years later, Margaret is healthy, Sarah is thriving, Patrick's family is settled in Canada, and we're learning to live with what happened. The scars remain. The wariness around trust. The knowledge that family bonds can be broken, that love isn't always enough to prevent betrayal, but also the knowledge that we're stronger than we thought, that we can survive even devastating betrayal, that we can build new families from ashes. Ryan will be eligible for parole in 12 years. We don't know what we'll do when that day comes. We take it one day at a time. For now, we have the occasional letter, the slow process of understanding how it all went so wrong, the grief of what was lost, and the gratitude for what remains. I never returned to Wall Street thinking, never went back to the obsessive focus on building wealth and legacy. What matters now is simpler and more profound. The people at my Sunday dinner table who chose to be there. The work we do to help others avoid our fate. The second chances we've been given. The trust we've rebuilt, carefully and selectively, with people who've earned it. That's what I think about now when I wake at 2 a.m. Not the horror of what Ryan tried to do, but the miracle of what Patrick did. The bravery of speaking up when it would have been easier to walk away. The loyalty of staying when told to leave. The courage of calling for help. That's the story I choose to remember. Not the son who betrayed us, but the stranger who saved us. Not the family we lost, but the family we found. And on the good days, and there are more good days now, that's enough. More than enough. It's everything.